Welcome to the RAS Project, episode 94, a conversation about life, entrepreneurship, personal development, family, tech, and marketing. My name is Ivan Temelkov, and I'm your host. Joining me this morning is my amazing sidekick, Courtney Turner. Good morning, Courtney. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So on this podcast, you will gather 100% real, raw, and unfiltered, life-changing advice to help you level up in every aspect of your life and business and help you reach your goals and dreams. So let's say it's been, 2 weeks, Courtney, I think, since we went live?
Yeah.
Wow. So, what's going on in Courtney's world? What have you been up to the last couple of weeks?
That's a very good question. I feel like it's been pretty busy. It's been kind of a whirlwind in terms of, what's going on in the world and the news and
Right.
so pretty caught up in all of that. Yeah. So
Yeah. So, it's been, you're definitely right. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. So, and one of the reasons why I wanted to chat about that actually is because my a couple of teachers in my kids' daycare actually caught COVID, and
wow.
so I literally was bogged down for about 2 weeks with my daughter being at home because she had to be quarantined, and so let's just say that my life got flipped upside down, literally. And it was actually very interesting, to be honest with you, because you suddenly realize how creative you have to get, really, to kind of survive, because that's like an extra layer. I mean, mind you, my kids are usually at daycare, during the days, and so I've got free time to do work. So with my daughter being at home, like, I had to cancel some things and I had to delay some stuff. Some work didn't get done, right? And so and then I had a business trip actually. I was out in West Virginia. Yeah, so it was pretty good. It was fun. I was out in Bristol City, which is in it's West Virginia / Tennessee, because it's kind of like, one side of the street is Tennessee and the other side is West Virginia. So it was kind of cool,
Wow, you're right on the border. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like right on the border. And so, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The last 2 weeks have been crazy.
And here we're about to go into further lockdowns. So yeah.
I know, right?
Like, not just lockdown, but we have curfews, which is, fascinating to me. Apparently we have very fancy science, and we realized that the virus is a super virus between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., which is just amazing. And
that is crazy.
Yeah. And we also no longer can dine outside. We can't, eat out at all. Everything's been completely shut down. So, but I'm very fascinated by this new science, that we've discovered a virus that has superpowers between the hours. So we're very advanced. Yes.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because we're starting to see that actually. And the funny thing you mentioned that is, we actually had our first Friendsgiving last night at the house.
Nice.
And we only had one family of friends that came over to hang out. But get this, this was so ludicrous. So my wife's best friend actually owns a gymnastics gym just across the way.
Oh, awesome.
And somebody had decided to call the cops on her because she's still open in the state of Illinois. They literally have a third tier lockdown now, and somebody actually called the cops, and so she actually couldn't show up to the Friendsgiving because she had to go and attend to the cops. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, are people literally that evil, like, that you would do something like that? And
they are.
They really are, but
it's just crazy.
It really is, and it's scary. It's scary because we are, this week is Thanksgiving, coming up, and this is a time of year when we're supposed to be showing gratitude and thanks for.
This is the other thing. This virus is like really amazing because it spikes before every major holiday.
That is true.
Not during the holidays, but right before, so that people can't celebrate the holiday. So it has like this internal calendar where it knows when all the holidays are, and that's when it spikes.
It's isn't that funny, like how that works? Basically, is like how that spikes right before the holidays.
Right before.
I know it's so ironic. So yeah, and actually, before we jump into a couple other things, I wanted to first of all mention a quick announcement that we are back on the multi-stream every Monday and Friday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're broadcasting in video on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Periscope, which, by the way, apparently we're striking a hot iron on Periscope from what I found. It's pretty fascinating. And let's see, what else did I miss? And then in audio, we are available on every major platform out there in the world. One other thing that I also wanted to mention is Courtney Turner's podcast is now live. So you guys need to go and check it out at CourtneyTurner.com and also Courtney's YouTube channel as well. Amazing. I mean, your story is fascinating, Courtney. It's just like, I mean, as I was going through it and listening to that episode again, I was like, holy shit. Like, and there were actually details in your story that, like, I think it might have, like, went in one year and gone out the other for me, honestly, because I have those moments, believe it or not. And like, as I was like re-listening this, I was like, here's people that are bitching and moaning about like shit that they're like, they've been granted, they've been blessed to have. And after listening to your story, it's like, you know what? Maybe my life's not so fucking bad. It's just like, it gives you a sense of gratitude and appreciation. And I feel like, in fact, this is another post that I was working on later on today. I feel like a lot of what we're seeing in social media right now is, misconceptions, opinions, hatred, violence, controversy also. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, okay, where's the positivity in all of this?
Right. Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? And it's like, when you think about it, is like, we're all talking about, oh, we want to be unified, like we want to work together as humans, but like we're dividing each other.
So much.
Like we're purposely dividing each other. And, maybe it's just me, but like, I kind of did an observation this past week of like my Facebook stream and like my Instagram stream. And I'm like, like a lot of this is controversy. A lot of this is, opinions. A lot of this is misconceptions, like everything everybody's saying. And there's just so little positivity. In fact, I happened to turn on the news because I have YouTube TV and I was scrolling through channels to find a movie. I was actually looking for Christmas Vacation because that is the movie that I watch like 50 gazillion times every year. And we happen to have it recorded on YouTube TV. So I'm scrolling through it and I'm like every news station that I scroll through, honestly, was like the story that just happened to catch was nothing positive, literally. Just like for a split of a second, just going through. I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm like, this is terrible. It's like, we're in the holidays and Thanksgiving, and maybe because I'm so much into the spirit now, and I watch too much Clark Griswold also as well. And in fact, fun fact, I was climbing on the roof this past weekend hanging lights. Because when my kids say, we want Christmas lights, guess what Ivan does? I crawl my ass up on the roof, and I start installing Christmas lights.
That's awesome.
Paying someone $500 to do it just doesn't seem feasible to me. I'm like, I'm going to put this up in an hour. You're going to make $500, So anyway, so definitely go and check out Courtney's podcast as well. And that leads us into, let's talk about Thanksgiving this week. So what are you thankful for, Courtney?
I am thankful for so much. I am thankful to be here. I am thankful for my health, for my friends, my family. I am thankful for the freedoms that we still have.
Right.
I'm thankful. I'm thankful for so much. And I think that one of the things that I love so much about this holiday is the time to really dial in and recognize what you're grateful for. I think something I actually wrote an article, it was 8 years ago now, but I think it still very much holds how I feel today, about how we as a society have become very shameful as opposed to grateful. And I think shame is, it's a natural human emotion. But I think that when it's being taught and, inculcated, that's really dangerous. And it's very dangerous to the psyche. Human beings need to have hope, and that I think stems from having gratitude for what you have.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that this is a time right now to recognize the things that we do have, to be really grateful for them, and to figure out how to preserve them.
Hmm. Yeah. No, you're 100% correct, and I agree with that so much on so many levels because you have to have a sense of gratitude inside yourself. I actually recently I was doing a live. I think it was when I was out of town on Twitch, and someone actually had brought up. I'm going to butcher the term. It's anti something, anti matalism or something like that. I'm trying to remember the word, but it has to do with the fact it's a very counterintuitive mentality. Basically, it talks about the fact that human beings are in fact a resentment to society. So it's a very degrading type of philosophical mentality. And like I'm sitting here and basically this person was saying that like what's the point of having goals and dreams? What's the point of having gratitude? I'm sitting here, I'm like, you must live a really lonely life. Like you must be really like, in sorrows and pain and negativity. And I just can't quite fathom how anybody would live like that,
So they were saying that there was no point in having gratitude?
Yeah, basically. So oh, here it is. I found it. Antinatalism is a philosophical position and social movement that assigns a negative value to birth. Antinalists argue that humans should abstain from procreation because it is morally bad. Some also recognize the procreation of other sentient beings as morally bad. Like, do you fathom that?
That I can't possibly fathom it, but I'm
Right.
seeing a lot of it. I think it is a very real movement.
Mhm.
And it stems from these depopulationists who, think that human beings are bad for the environment.
Right.
And they have this theory that we are overpopulated, which is actually statistically not true. We are overpopulated in cities, but as a species, we are not. And there is actually a lot of, in most of the world, there's certain parts where, people are still procreating, but in most of the world, like it used to be common generations ago to have 5, 6 siblings, and now lots of people don't even get married, don't even have children. So there is I have seen this movement towards a moral approach to that,
Yeah.
which I think is just astounding. I mean, I think human beings, we're flawed beings. Obviously, we are far from perfect, but we've done so much for the world, and
Yeah.
that is what we're here to do. And this goes back to this idea of shame, though, right? Is that we should have some sort of core shame in our existence. How is that productive to anybody?
Right.
And that's essentially what you're saying. This idea, I mean, if we should disparage procreating, then that essentially means that human beings have no value, or worse than that, they have negative value. And I
Exactly.
just don't see how that's productive to anything.
Yeah. No, there's so much, and I appreciate you actually sharing your take on this because I know that philosophy is your thing, and psychology also, and I very much admire that. But you mentioned a couple things, and this really goes to talking about gratitude. This is the week of Thanksgiving also, and why we should be grateful, for a lot of things that you mentioned that you're grateful for, a lot of things that I'm grateful for. And you're absolutely right. We as human beings are flawed. That's a known fact. We're imperfect, but that's the beauty about it and how God created us individually is just that he created us to be imperfect because we could contribute to society and we could perfect and we could improve each other. I shouldn't use the word perfect, by the way, because perfect is so flawed, but improve each other, improve ourselves also, and be able to learn and grow. Because think about it, is that's the essence of life, right? That's why you're given a life, is to go through all of these experiences. And so I think Thanksgiving just really as a holiday, should bring that sense of gratitude and unify
Absolutely.
people and really make you realize that, you know what, like my life does have a meaning. And there's a lot of people
Absolutely.
out there that I think you're absolutely right, especially right now with everything that's going on with the pandemic and politics and so much violence.
And I think I also want to add Thanksgiving is an American holiday, uh,
Yes.
right? And so I really implore people to study the truth of American history.
Mhm.
There is another movement towards this revisionist history that creates a lot of shame around our history. And again, we are flawed human beings. Flawed human beings create flawed society. America has not done everything perfectly, but we have done a lot that is very good.
Yeah.
And Thanksgiving is really the story of, entrepreneurialism and of, freedom and of people, our ancestors who took tremendous risks. And through those risks, they had tremendous ingenuity. And I think that is really important to recognize and to celebrate and to recognize that the reason that we have so much prosperity and so much ingenuity and freedom today is because of our ancestors.
Yeah.
And that is something to really cherish, really be grateful for, really honor and respect. So
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate you bringing up the fact that Thanksgiving is an American holiday because that's really important, to notate. In fact, me being an immigrant, I actually have family members, across the pond who refer to it as Turkey Day, Day of the Turkey, basically. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, I have to correct you because it's not just about a freaking turkey.
no,
It's the turkey is the gratitude and the appreciation. It's a celebration behind, like you said, the prosperity and the freedom and what the ancestors have done. The forefathers that have fought for, like you said. Both of us are entrepreneurs, and to be able to have this willpower and this freedom, and to be able to congregate with family and friends and loved ones.
yeah,
And mind you that family is not, I want to mention this, family is not just by blood.
sure.
Family are people that genuinely, support you and are there for you. Because I think one of the biggest misconceptions, especially around Thanksgiving, is that let's get together with family, like blood family, cousins and aunts and uncles and all of that, right? Because it's
Right.
a blood relation, right? But no, it's not. It's, it could be your best friend from high school. That's family. Someone's
Absolutely.
been there with you for all these years. And I
Yeah.
think people, first of all, there's a misconception about Thanksgiving to the outside world.
Mhm.
And I think also the way that, families celebrate it, I think on Thanksgiving, is that it's not just by blood. It's family, they're people that you hold close to you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the history of Thanksgiving shows that,
Mhm.
the people who gathered around, it was the people who, they weren't all by blood. It was
Yep.
about gratitude for those in their lives that had contributed to this prosperity that enabled the feasts that they had.
Right.
And I think that there's another thing I really want to address is just that what when you ask like what am I grateful for, and one of the things I am grateful, and I said I was grateful for the freedoms that we still have. And, part of we're both entrepreneurs. As an entrepreneur, you take risks, right? But in
Yes.
order to take risks, you have to have the freedom to do so.
Right.
And, our ancestors took tremendous risks. They came here fleeing religious persecution, economic tyranny, and, they came here to take risks that are beyond what I think any of us could possibly fathom
Yep.
today.
Yep.
And, I always say there's actually a risk taking gene. It's the RDR4 with the seventh allele. And I'm convinced that Americans are, comprised of the highest population of people with with that gene.
Mhm.
And you see that with the ingenuity that Americans have fostered, and, the things that they have created and developed. You do see that. But I think there is, that is at risk currently. We're seeing a lot less of it. We're seeing a lot
Yeah.
more restrictions placed upon us. And
Right.
that's in jeopardy. And so I think it's something people should really be grateful for. Not everybody needs to be a big risk taker, and everybody takes risks according to their threshold. But
Yep.
we should be grateful for those that are willing to take the risk for us to benefit from. So,
Absolutely. No, that was very, very well put. One thing that I wanted to come back to about Thanksgiving for a second is that, and then this kind of segue into Black Friday is that I think one of the biggest misconceptions that's happening in American society is that there's some sense of forgetfulness of what Thanksgiving is really about.
mhm.
And maybe this is because I watch Christmas Vacation about 40 times minimum every year. And I remember the part where Clark Griswold is getting ready to cut into the turkey, and all the family is sitting on the table, right? And that's really what that frame is meant to highlight, is like the unity of family, right? Well,
Sure.
as you said, I think a lot of Americans think, okay, well, Thanksgiving week, Thanksgiving, I'm going to eat turkey, gravy, stuffing, pie also, and then I'm going to go shopping for Black Friday. I'm like, really? Is that what you're looking forward to? Like in Thanksgiving week? Isn't that saddening?
Yes, and people are really crazy on Black Friday, and it's
Yeah.
it's fascinating, right? Just to think of it from a psychological perspective, and sociological, observing humanity. We have this really joyous, heartfelt, very meaningful holiday where
Mhm.
we're expressing our gratitude for things in our lives and those that came before us, and then the next day we go and pummel people because they cut in front of us in line to get, a TV. It's like, wait, well, what happened to that gratitude,
Right, right. No,
It's
that
like an
has,
oxymoron.
yes.
And
So
people
I'm
think it's
glad you
easy.
brought up,
Yeah.
yes. I'm glad you brought up the social element of Black Friday, because that's an excellent thing to talk about. And look, I've been guilty of this because before I had kids, actually, me and my wife used to stand in lines because my wife was batshit crazy about deals. And I gotta, to some extent, I maybe because when I was younger, I was actually able to do this, but now I can't do it because I just don't have the patience for it. But the social element of this is, you're absolutely right, is just that people will battle through lines and battle each other just so they can get their hands on something materialistic that
Yeah.
otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford, only
Right.
so they can get their hands on it. I'm sitting here thinking, and now that we're talking about this, is like, okay, do I really need a 70-inch TV that bad? Like, let's think about it. Yes, I would love to because I could do a bunch of shit with it, right? But like, do I really need it? Is it a need? Is it a necessity, or is it a want?
And
And
go on.
go
I
ahead.
was going to say, I think there's nothing wrong with wants and desires, and
Mhm.
there's certainly a limit. Like excessive greed is not something I condone. However, I think the fact that we as human beings always want things and we aspire to things is what motivates us. And that is the beauty of a capitalistic society, is that people will be incentivized to work hard so they can have a 70-inch TV. And
Right.
I don't disparage that at all. However, I what I do disparage is the way people conduct themselves in that process. So it's
Yeah.
great that we have a day where you can get these deals, and companies can move product that they might not otherwise be able to. This is product
Yeah.
that's still sitting on the shelves before they need to clear out and bring in new merchandise and inventory. But cutting people in line, fighting people. I mean, the things that happen on Black Friday are, some of the stories are just really crazy. And it's like, are we animals or are we human beings? Like,
Well,
how important is that TV to you?
yeah,
If it's that important to you, get online really early in the morning.
yeah,
People should be incentivized to work hard. And if
yeah,
that means, a TV you wouldn't normally be able to afford, and you get up a few hours early and you go stand online, more power to you. I
yeah.
have I have no problems with that. But when you start hurting other people, or when you are cheating your way through, then I think that becomes a moral question that we need to look at. And I just think it's really ironic that it comes after Thanksgiving, which, people are
Right.
supposed to be showing the gratitude for the things that they do have. And even for the things that you don't, I mean, the opportunity to have Black Friday is amazing. The fact
Oh
that,
yeah.
the companies and stores will put these great deals out for you that you can get things that you might not afford otherwise.
Yeah.
So showing a little gratitude as opposed to, I think that when these people get into these fights and these, really uncouth behaviors, I think it stems from a lack of gratitude.
Yeah, it
They're
really
they're
does.
coming from a scarcity mindset of what they don't have and what they feel entitled to. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to mention on that, because I want to move to the main topic that I want to talk about, is just that you're absolutely right. It's the scarcity mindset. But one thing that I also wanted to touch upon too is just that I remember when my cousins were here to visit. I guess it was 10 years ago from Bulgaria. And it was actually when my sister was getting married. So they came here for her wedding. It was like a big trip of like cousins from overseas, right? And I remember my cousin actually was wanting to get a camera while he was here. Mind you, this was like 10 years ago was like when DSLRs, were still really popular, and like, photography enthusiasts were really into it. And he is like, especially into like wildlife and stuff like that. Well, I remember him coming here and he was looking at like a Nikon camera. It was like $1,100 at the time. It was like a top of the line Nikon, like with the lens and bells and the whistles. And I remember he was like, I can't even get my hands on this in Eastern Europe. If I can, it's probably a replica. It's not a real thing, and it's probably twice as much. I'm like, what the hell? And so, like, what you were talking about is like about Black Friday, that we actually have the luxury to actually go out and buy this merchandise that companies are trying to move from the shelf that would otherwise sit. That is such a huge advantage and a luxury that people don't understand.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
process of approaching it is like, you don't have to fight each other. You're still going to get your hands on it. Don't fight each other. Like, let's be civil here about it, which kind of brings me to the main topic that I want to talk about, because I definitely want to spend, time on this. And that is, who controls your life? Because there's so much that we just talked about that I think right now with, what's happening with the election results, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, just the holidays being around, like, I feel like society is so overwhelmed that they're forgetting about the fact that you control your life. You control your choices. You control your decisions. Let's talk about that. I want to get your take on who controls Courtney's life.
Well, I like to believe I control my life.
Hmm.
Um, so for those who don't know, I was a philosophy major, and I was always fascinated with the existentialists, and I was fascinated with them from actually a very, very young age. Um, when my grandfather had passed, I was 9 years old, and I really assessed my views on religion and spirituality. I guess like philosophical frameworks. And I had designed kind of this theory of my own, and a lot of it is very reminiscent of existentialism. And one of the things and my mom used to, as a kid, I remember I was so fascinated. I actually did an independent study in high school on philosophy. And
Hmm.
my mom was like, I don't know why you like them. They're so depressing. And could they essentially say your life has no meaning? Like Sartre and Heidegger both had a variation of the same quote that, man is hurled into the world, and thus having been hurled, he is responsible for everything he does.
Hmm.
There's slight variation, but both Heidegger and Sartre had a quote that essentially said that. And I thought the opposite. I thought that was incredibly empowering because it meant that our life wasn't predestined, that somebody hadn't decided where we're going to end up. We have
Hmm.
free will and we are responsible, which is a lot of pressure, but it means that we have power over, what we do. We can make choices in our life. And so we are the masters, we are the creators of our destiny. We don't have full control, obviously. We can't control our circumstances. We can't control the way other people interact or the things that we encounter. But we absolutely have a lot of control over our choices. And so that's something I try to remind myself all the time is when things are difficult, when things are challenging, when I don't like where things are going, is to take responsibility and how can I improve my circumstance and what can I do with the things that I have at hand.
Yeah. No, that's a really good way of putting it. And the reason I wanted to bring up this topic is for a lot of different reasons, honestly. I wanted to talk about it today specifically on the show because I think over the last 2 weeks, I've been a lot more subconscious about. I know personally, I have a lot of things going on right now. One of them is I started a new nutritional plan about 3 weeks ago, something completely different than I've ever done. It's a
Wow.
lot more balanced. I'm also in the gym 3 to 5 days per week, which
Nice.
is like extreme for me. I've never done anything like this
Oh,
before.
wow. Awesome.
Um, yeah, so it's a real progression, but it has really, from a mindset standpoint, has really got me thinking into the fact that, you know what, we as humans, at least I'm led to believe that we pave our way. There's people in our lives and there's things in our lives that definitely impact the things that we do, whether it's in our personal lives or business. But for the most part, you get to make certain choices, right?
Yeah.
You make all the choices, and those choices, those actions that follow those choices have either positive or negative impact. And what I've noticed actually a lot of in society is that, first of all, when people make bad decisions, they frown upon that. And a lot of times they don't take accountability because they think that someone else should be accountable for their own mistakes. And I'll give you a prime example. Over the last 3 weeks, there's been several times where I've ate like shit. Literally. In fact, last night was one of them because it was a Friendsgiving. And I'm like, Ivan, you know better. You shouldn't have done this. Okay, use it as a cheat meal, right? But the reality of things, then I realized, okay, I have two choices. I could fall into self-pity and dwell in it and say, Ivan, you made bad choices. This is going to impact you. This is going to degrade, the course of your path. Or be solution oriented and just keep going, right? And just say, okay, this is a hiccup. Keep going, okay? Leave it in the past. It has happened. You can't change it. And I think now that I more and more think about this, especially over the last couple of weeks, is that when I was younger, I used to fall into self-pity. I used to dwell on mistakes. And I think it's because I was allowing people, including some family and friends around me, to dictate that kind of mentality. Whether it was in life, relationships, business. I know in business many times we'll be like, Ivan, you really probably should have done this differently. And it's like, you know what? It was a fuck up. You made a mistake. It's going to happen. Whether it was intentional or intentional, you're going to make those mistakes. You're not perfect. You'll have flaws, but learning to accept that, Courtney, has been so difficult. But in doing that, I feel like it's made me more of a whole person in realizing that I have flaws, I will make mistakes, but I'm really good at a lot of things. But finding that counterbalance, and it goes back to who controls your life? I control my life. I get to make choices. I take actions, good ones and bad ones. There's positive impact, there's negative impact. But at the end of the day, 99% of the things that happen in my life, whether they're good or bad, is the result of the choices and actions that I made.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it, literally. And I think there's so many people. I mean, right now, let's face it, everything that's going on in the world, literally. I mean, we could be on the cusp of World War III for all I know, honestly. But like, there's
We
so
might
much.
already be kind of in World War III.
Right. And I'm like sitting here thinking, I'm like, because when you look at the world as a whole, right? Whether it's religion, it's violence, it's chaos, it's everything. I mean, it's a direct correlation of someone or certain people's choices and actions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's what leads up to that result. And
Absolutely.
so,
It's
could
a
people?
ripple effect, so I think
Yep.
this is something when people think that, what they do doesn't matter or that it just impacts them or, that they're that insignificant. The truth of the matter is that human beings are actually quite insignificant in the grand sense. We are a blip on, a speck in the grand scheme of the universe.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we have no impact or that we don't matter, because every choice we make has an impact, and it is a ripple effect. It impacts those who are close. It certainly impacts us, and then that has an effect on those who are closest to us, and then they have an effect on the people around them, and the circle just keeps expanding, and it
Right.
is a ripple. So I think people, when you start to have a sense of that, you you take a lot more ownership over your choices because you realize that you have an impact on not only, the trajectory of your own future, but that of those around you. So,
No, this is, again, this is why I wanted to discuss this topic on the show, is because and when you think about it, is a lot of, your life and business is a correlation of your psychology, of your mindset, is, how you think, how you react, who you surround yourself with. I mean, I think who you surround yourself with, yes, definitely matters, because you don't want to be around negative people. I mean, being around negative people just makes you realize like how much more positive you really are. That's about
yeah.
the only thing. That's why they say, like-minded people stick with like-minded people, right? Is positive people hang with positive people. You're never going to see positive people hanging with negative people because they don't have anything in common, literally. One's like, dreading on something, and the other's like, all positive and ready to take on the world. But a lot of it is psychology. A lot of it is mindset, and I know personally, like when I look back at, 7 years now being a cyclist, like even to this day, I have no freaking idea like why I even started doing that. But over the 7 years, there's been so many psychological developments that has really kind of created different scenarios and stories as to leading up to the reasoning behind it. And a
Yeah.
lot of it actually had nothing to do with exercising, believe it or not. I
I
mean,
do
it is an
believe it.
exercise, but for the most part, it was mindset development. It was
Yeah.
endurance, as an internal endurance,
Yeah.
not physical endurance.
I
And
believe it.
one of my clients actually that I visited on my trip in West Virginia actually said something. He said, it really stuck in my mind, and I wanted to bring it up too. Is he said, people do business, with people that like, trust, and see value. And so the likability is like, okay, my client's fit, really buff and stuff. So like I'm into exercise and health and fitness. So there's like a common interest, right?
Hmm.
But I think it's also a matter of appeal as well.
Hmm.
Because
Sure.
when you appeal to each other also, that creates that likability, that creates that common interest. So like,
Well, it's
especially
also relatability, Yeah, I think
yes.
that's a huge part of
Mhm.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, the relatability is such an important factor, is because let's face it, if you don't have anything to relate to with someone, like you have nothing to talk about, really. Like there's
Yeah.
no discussion there. And so in fact, relatability, that's a really good one that you mentioned. I think, when it comes to controlling your life, is that you have to have relatability to common interests, to common people that have similar interests like you, to things, to in the world and society, things you do for a hobby, things that you do for fun, like there's always a relatability factor, right? Like for me,
Values. I think that that's a really big one.
yeah,
Values. I want to
values.
stress something you were saying about the cycling and how like it was more about mindset than it was even about
Mhm.
exercise. Um, I think one of the things about I totally believe that I have my show Whim. What is movement? It's all about
Yes.
that. About what we learn from movement and how movement is a metaphor for life. And I think one of the things that is so missing from people today, and this really speaks to why I think there is a lack of gratitude, is that I think people lack personal responsibility and a sense
Mhm.
of it. And I think it is something that physical training really teaches you. I always say this, that it doesn't matter how gifted an athlete is. You're not going to the Olympics by sitting on your butt every day watching. It's just not going to happen. And it doesn't
Yep.
matter how much raw talent you have. You still have to put the work in. And
Yep.
any athlete knows that. They know that it's about the time, the effort, and strategy that they put into whatever sport it is or whatever training it is. What you put in is what you get out. And that teaches you a sense of personal responsibility. And I
Yeah.
think that part of why we see such a increase in depression and people feeling like they don't matter, they don't have an impact, is because they're not taking personal responsibility. And
Yep.
personal responsibility is what gives you a sense of meaning in your life. It gives you a sense of purpose. Even if it's just meaning, which I think is a smaller scale than purpose, which has a much larger scale. And, purpose can lead to a sense of primordial
Yep.
transcendence. But, meaning is important as well. And meaning comes from a sense of personal responsibility, is taking ownership and, accountability, and feeling that we have pride in what we do. And I think that, physical training really does teach you that, because it's so tangible. You just know what you put in is what you get out, and you see it, you feel it, and you can't argue with it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And actually, speaking of the What Is movement, actually, just to throw in a plug for you, for those that are watching and watching the replay, make sure you visit CourtenayTurner.com and check out Courtney's first episode of the Courtenay Turner podcast. There's also info about WIM also on her website, which is just fascinating. But what you said is right on point. And you talked about accountability. And I think that's how you really gain control of your life too. Is just that, by being more accountable about things, and not just being accountable about, well, good things, bad things too. Because accountability is about responsibility, right? And that's a difficult thing. And I know personally, when I was younger, that's something that I struggled with. I'd make a mistake and I tried to shove it under the rug because I didn't want to deal with it. It's like when a kid gets in trouble and they don't want to face the consequences.
They're caught with their hand in the cookie jar and they're like, it wasn't
me. Exactly. It's like, who stole a cookie from the cookie jar? Wasn't me, because you don't want to admit
their hand is literally in the cookie jar. Yeah.
Exactly. And been there, done that. And what I realized is this time, the people who have control of their lives are the ones that are the most humble, the most admittable, the most accountable, most responsible, and there's a lot of those things when it comes to especially accountability that I think society frowns upon, because let's face it, I mean, in the social world, you make a mistake or you rub someone the wrong way, suddenly they're unattracted to you. They don't want to talk to you. If anything, they unfriend you or block you on social media. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? What are we in third grade? But that's the reality, literally. And I think I mentioned this earlier on the show of, how evil some people can be. In fact, I think I mentioned about my wife's best friend who owns a gymnastics gym, and someone called the cops on her because they hadn't closed the gym. And I'm like, really? Just imagine, like, the time and energy someone spent doing that could have been spent doing something more productive.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure. And I want to address, like, when you're saying how, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, go on.
All right. No, it's all right. Hopefully we can come back to it. But, controlling your life is about, not only accountability, but, also making the choices that you're comfortable with, because
this is what I to address. Okay. I think this also relates to, you were saying that it's becoming like pervasive, where people won't take responsibility, and there's like this social pressure against it. And I think that's absolutely accurate. I'm seeing so much of that today, and I think it's because there is this very just pervasive infiltration of making victimhood trendy. I had the hard time getting the words out because it's so hard to even say that.
It's true.
But I'm seeing so much of it, and it bothers me so much, because I just don't see how on earth that's productive. I see that as human beings, we have such tremendous capability for progress and advancements, and we're capable of doing such monumental things. But victimhood, just destroys all of that. It takes away so much of our potential, and it leads us to be shameful and depressed, and just it really hinders all progress and productivity. So I'm seeing such, like, it really is trendy, and instead of people taking pride in their successes, in taking pride in their efforts and working towards things, instead they're being glorified for being victims. And it's astounding to me. I don't get it at all.
I couldn't agree with that anymore. You talked about victimhood. It's just that, I'll give you a prime example is, about controlling life. Over the last couple of weeks, and I think I mentioned this in the beginning, is just that I've been putting emphasis on, like, okay, Am I living a life where, I'm making the choices that I want and taking the actions that I feel comfortable with? Or am I so consciously worried about other people's perception and likability and acceptance? And this has been a struggle for a very long time for me, because at one point, and someone who, I was bullied all through high school, so I had huge self-confidence issues for a very long time, and I was wondering, like, am I making the right choices? Is this for me, or do I need to make choices for other people? And what's really fascinating, and I mentioned this in my story actually earlier, is that you find who your true supporters and friends are, and family, I should say, when you kind of like venture off on your own beaten path to find yourself, and let's face it, I'm very raw, I'm very direct, I'm very transparent. I don't give a fuck, this is me, you like it or not, and it's like, I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. And suddenly it seems like all the access baggage, so to speak, started like diffusing slowly. Like these people that I thought were like there for like support, moral support, encouragement, no longer there, kind of like face. But then it's funny because like those people will come back for help and be like, oh, help
Right.
me. It's like, okay, this is a two-way street, not a one-way street.
Right.
So, but the most fascinating thing about this, Courtney, is that really finding myself, as an individual, as a person of who I am. And actually, while I was on my business trip, there was one night that me and my client cleared 2 bottles of red wine because we were just talking. It was quite a bit in like maybe 2 hours time.
Wow.
That literally, I mean, we were just
Bottle
drinking
each.
like fish. And one thing that we were talking about is, he said, reaching the top, getting to be the person that you want to be, is actually a lonely road, because so many people are not going to see the things that you see. So many people are going to degrade you along the way. So many people are going to try to discourage you. Some people even try to sabotage you,
Yeah.
even because they'll also feel that the word is not violated. They feel uh,
Threatened. Threatened.
threatened.
Yeah.
Yes, threatened because you are finding yourself intimidated. That's the word, intimidated,
Yep.
because you come across as someone who, let's face it, if you're someone who truly knows yourself, you control your life, you know the things you want. Like, this is what I want out of my personal life. This is what I want out of business. And, by God, I'll do everything possible. That comes across intimidating to people.
Sure.
It does, because it comes across as intimidating because you know who you are and what you want in life, and they don't. And they
Right.
feel intimidated because they feel overpowered.
Or it highlights their insecurities and
Mhm.
the thing that they are unsure of. So
Yeah,
a lot of people like to. Nietzsche has a great quote that people don't want the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. And I think there's a lot of truth in that,
yeah,
like a lot of people live in their fantasy world because they don't want to face the truth. And I think more than even facing the truth of the world out there externally, most people have the hardest time wrestling with the truth about themselves.
yeah,
That's terrifying to most people. Most people would rather, it's part of why intimacy is so difficult for most people. Most people, even people who have spent their life being married, have families, to be truly intimate is very difficult for a lot of people. And it's not the intimacy of being presented with the other human. It's that mirror being held to you. It's being, able to be truly vulnerable, knowing yourself, viewing yourself, really like taking an introspective look at yourself, and then being willing and able to share that with another.
yeah.
And that process it's an ongoing process, right? So you're always uncovering more and more about yourself. And that, I think, is something that a lot of people don't want to do, or not capable of doing, and are really terrified of doing. So.
I want to touch up on one thing before we wrap up this episode, and that is, you talked about intimacy, but you made a really good point. You said, and this is probably an outdated statistic, but I think over 60% of marriages in the United States result in divorces. That's a probably 5-year-old statistic, so that might be even higher now. at this point, which is kind of saddening, right? But you said real and vulnerable. And here's why I think a lot of marriages, especially in the United States, result in divorces is because after a period of time, right, this is why, well, this is really with any relationship, whether you're married or not. It just takes work, and you have to be real, and you have to be transparent, and you have to be vulnerable. But at some point, like you said, that mirror you were talking about creates division because you're starting to hide insecurities. Because you're afraid of being judged, right? When if you ask me, in a relationship, you should have a sense of openness. You should have transparency, right? And that also makes you feel like you have control over your life because you're not holding anything back.
Right. But I think the other thing too, so when you were saying like people might feel intimidated, so someone, I mean, we're all a work in progress, right? But there are people who do have a much more of a sense of courage in, examining themselves. And I think that actually can be very intimidating to others who are not, because it highlights the fact that they are unaware of themselves, that they are hiding themselves, that they are not living authentically. And, people don't necessarily want to look at their negative traits or what it is that they are. This goes back to victimhood again, right? It's a lot easier to blame somebody else than it is to take responsibility for the mistakes that you have made. And sometimes we make, and most of the, I don't know, like a lot of the times we make mistakes unintentionally. We don't go around like trying to step in potholes, we step in them because we didn't see them. So, take ownership of that though. You made a mistake, and what can we learn from it? But a lot of times people don't want to do that. They want to blame somebody else, blame a circumstance. And I think when you see somebody who has, the courage of who they are and is very aware of who they are, that can be very intimidating and threatening to somebody who's not, and who is, in their shadows. So
absolutely. Amazing discussion again, Courtney. I think this was a great topic, and I want to thank you for contributing so much to it. I know from a psychology standpoint, you always bring the fire on stuff like this. And for those that are watching and listening, this was episode 94 of the RAS Project, multi-streaming everywhere. We are all over on every audio video platform, and we're back Friday, so that'll be Black Friday. Black Friday. That'll be an interesting discussion for sure. And Courtney, do you have anything else to add before we wrap things up?
No, this was awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Awesome. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.